Oh, that would be a really wonderful idea. I think we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. I am just doing my last technical details, but today I am very happy to say we are talking about agency, and I specially invited Vida Cruz to come and talk to us about with us. I don't mean to treat you as someone who's on the hot seat, Vida, but I think um, your thread of 2 days ago on Twitter was something that was really wonderful, and I really wanted it to be a sort of jumping off point, if you don't mind, for this discussion. So, can you tell us a bit about it?
Okay. So, first of all, before that, another thread went viral about inactive protagonists, and it was basically saying that if you're doing it, hold on, let me recall this one. If you're doing three-act structure, your protagonist always needs to have a goal and always needs to be pushing forward from scene to scene. And that's the thing, though. Three-act structure prioritizes conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot. Well, what I noticed talking with fellow authors who are not white and editing for a lot of clients who also happen to be not white, we're all getting the same comments of your protagonist isn't active. But when I look over these stories as an editor, to me, they're active already. And the difference that I found is that non-white authors, but later on also neurodivergent, chronically ill, mentally ill, and it turns out also working class and queer and female abuse survivors, they all write protagonists who are simply trying to survive a bad situation. And I think what Western publishing doesn't acknowledge enough is that survival is a choice and survival is a story.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be hard to break away from this kind of mentality if you've grown up with three-act structure and hero's journey. And I have, definitely. But there are lots of examples all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the one way to break out of it is uh, looking for different storytelling structures. For example, in East Asia, their regular mode for storytelling is called Kisho Tenketsu, which is four parts. And you have the introduction, the build up, a twist that seems totally unrelated to the first two, and then you have the conclusion, which ties up all three that went before.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of examples there in manga and anime. What else is there? So ever since that thread blew up, I also got in contact with a bunch of other people who were like, "Hey, there are all these structures elsewhere," and I haven't looked at all of them. But yeah, the point is, these structures don't actually use conflict as a motive. They focus on maybe relationship building. Usually, it's friendship, it's love, it's the whole purpose is not to win, but to just live your life. And there's a lot to there's a lot to be said for that kind of slice of life storytelling, because for a lot of people it is hard to stomach a completely conflict driven narrative. But I've strayed away from agency as I went into
No, no, that's
storytelling
okay.
structure.
I
um,
I think it's important to have these ingredients in our discussion,
okay.
even if story structure is not our main focus.
Anyway, but to return to agency, like your I guess what you mean by inactive protagonist in terms of three act structure is, and I've seen this a lot too in my clients' work. You've got a character who is simply going about their day. They wake up, they brush their teeth, they're pouring their milk for their cereal, they take a shower. They're just going through a routine, and it's obvious that the author is still trying to find the story. It's what they've written down on the page is the character doing things but without intention and without decision behind it.
Mm.
Whereas you can also write about a protagonist who is simply trying to survive trauma, who tries to disengage from conflict ridden situation or navigate their way around it without having to directly address it.
Hmm. Yeah, totally makes sense. Vita and I actually had a brief interaction on Facebook too, in which I was saying that I didn't want to detract from the story structure aspect of this, but it also speaks to me as being very relevant to questions of sexism because, um, as you were mentioning before, Vita, women can be in these situations where they're surrounded by things that they can't control. And also, there is this question, which was the question that we were going to talk about the previous last week when we couldn't make it, which was that a lot of these Western narratives are confusing strength with agency and putting in a woman character who has all these skills but doesn't have any power to direct the story at all.
I've, I've got a genre example for you. If you've read Tombs of Atawan by Ursula Le Guin,
Yeah.
that is a great example of a character with agency, but who is just trying to get out of literally a bad situation, a very dark labyrinth.
Yeah.
And then I guess this is where I saw the sex, not quite sexism thing, but the notice that Tenar story is about leaving that dark place. And previously on Wizard of Earthsea, Ged is on a quest, is on a conflict-ridden quest to get rid of this shadow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're very different from one another. Um, yeah. Well, I mean, it is a really interesting question, and I think it's something that is worth thinking about um, when you're putting together a story and when you're putting together a society and you're setting up the situations that people get themselves into, right? I had to work a lot on the character of Tamalera in Mazes of Power because um, she is a person who is completely trapped and has been trapped for 18 years, but she's not a weak person. And I wanted to make sure that she didn't come across as a weak person or someone who should be blamed for her own situation, because that's a very common diminishment strategy.
My God, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's
Please
okay.
go ahead.
For, for characters who are in tough situations. I can mute you if you want. You can unmute when you're ready. Yeah, and so in early drafts, actually, Aliette de Bodin was looking at her and saying, she's not coming across as strong enough. And I'm like, how do you tell the difference, or how do you make the difference between someone who is strong and trapped and someone who is weak, right? And for me, it was mostly a matter of making sure I gave her opportunities on the page to show that she was reaching out and trying to make connections with other people who could be a support structure for her. And often having those systematically cut off by um, by her husband. But so that you could see all of the effort that she was putting into it,
Right.
even if none of it really ended up going anywhere.
Right. I mean, she wasn't passive. She was trying. I mean, her husband kept slapping her back, but she wasn't just sitting there taking it. She was trying to take action to give
Yeah.
herself power.
And she also had this thing where she would throw tantrums. and and for me that was actually really important because she has so much energy and there's nowhere for it to go, right? And so it ends up coming out in these tantrums that she has when she just can't take it anymore. And the tantrums really don't have any measurable effect on what people do around her. So I don't know. I felt like at the time, I felt like it was kind of a risk to have her do that, because she might look silly or whatever, but it just seemed to fit with the situation that she was in as far as I was concerned.
I think that part of the question is, you said situations that people get themselves into versus situations that people are put into, or
Oh, that's true.
yeah. And if you don't have the ability to change the situation or choose which situation you're in, which most people, well, okay, I don't know to say most people don't have the option of changing the situation, but there are aspects of your life that you can change and aspects you can't. And you can't change something or work to change something if you don't know that change is possible.
Yeah, that's true too.
So to say someone doesn't have any agency if they don't know that something can be changed,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you say that? Can you say you have no agency because you don't know something can be changed? I guess you don't, because if you don't know it, you can't do it. So, I mean, that's what agency is. The ability to do something about a given situation. Or
Agency is also having a sort of awareness of the space that you're moving through and navigating it well, or navigating it with intent. Not
Yes.
necessarily even a goal, but like avoidance is its own type of
Navigating with
Yeah.
awareness.
And
of
I
the
honestly
space.
think avoidance is one of those things that we don't spend enough time with in Western narratives, right? I mean, there's a lot of this conflict equals overt fighting, or yeah, I don't know. I'm having a hard time putting words on it.
well, there's the thing that I learned, that a lot of people have learned from a really good sensei. The best fight is the one that you're not in, or some variation on that. Is the best way to win a fight is to just not be in it. Don't, they're not saying that there's nothing wrong with not being in a fight. That doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be fought. Don't engage. Don't engage with the trolls. Don't engage with people who are going to make your life more difficult. But that is not as exciting. There isn't as much kapow, bam, explosion in that. So some people will find that less interesting to read about. And that's a difference in what stories look like, which we were talking about. So a lot of us grow up with that's the thing. You should start off with a bang. You should start a story with a big event. But that's what a lot of people who grow up with Western narratives are used to. But there are other options. Not being in the fight, not having the conflict, having something else be important.
To jump off on what you said earlier, Morgan, I think there's also confusion about what exactly is the change, what the actions that constitute the change. For example,
Mhm.
the Big Bang Kapow. Most people expect change to be on a world changing level, like I've changed this society completely for the better. But most people, for the most part, the kind of changes they make in their lives are baby steps, like little things they can do for themselves or the community. Sometimes just really for themselves, because that's all that they can change. That's all they have control to change. And I do think that there is value in narratives like this, and it is probably a challenge for the writer to be able to dramatize this in like a very interesting way. So I'm trying to think of an example, but a lot of there are some quest narratives, I think, that are actually dramatizations of what's going on within the protagonist.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, yeah, like I guess off the top of my head, Never Ending Story
Yeah.
and The Secret of Kells, if you've seen that film.
Mm-hmm. I love
Yeah.
Secret of Kells.
Me too. Yeah. That's a that's a really great what do you call that? Dramatization in animation form of what I mean, yeah, there's an external conflict of the Vikings going to conquer the village, but it's also about Brendan trying to wrestle the fears he has within him in order to be able to uh, what he thinks at first is save the village. Sorry if you haven't seen this movie. He thinks at first that
This is
you
not a
think
spoiler-free zone.
okay.
Yeah, no, dive into world building is like, beware of spoilers if you come in the door.
Okay, so
I'll
he
trip over
thinks
the there.
Brandon thinks at first that he has to save the village, but there is honestly very little chance that he was going to anyway. So what he actually saves is the a book. His actually he saves himself and the book. The two of them are inextricably linked. They are both key to saving the soul of this village, which is knowledge of their stories, of their civilization before the Vikings burned it down. And that also may be unsatisfying to a Western reader, perhaps, but I don't know.
I think part of it is the narratives that are about communities versus individuals.
Mm-hmm.
The chosen one, the hero, the one person who can save everyone, versus you can't. There is no such person. Everybody has, can do only so much, and you do a little bit, and someone else does a little bit, and someone else does a little bit, and those add up to things getting done. And
Right.
something, this is a Jewish thing, about tikkun olam, which is repairing the world. It's, you are not required to complete it, but you are not free to refrain from it. But that goes both ways. Um, you're not free to refrain from participating, but you don't have to complete it. You have to contribute, but you do not have to do it all by yourself.
Right.
And
It's a
that,
beautiful concept.
and I think it is the culture or cultures. I'm not sure how many there really are. They're colonization, colonizer and largely American, I think. The individualist, fend for yourself, do everything. You can do everything. It has to be done on your own. Is pretty ineffective for almost everything. I mean, okay, put your own shoes on, but you can't make your own shoes from scratch, really, because you're going to get the components from somewhere and somebody else is going to be providing those. This is what humans are.
Mhm.
They work together. That's what being a social species is. My horse, my hobby horse, sorry. But that's it. People need communities, and those are the stories that people raised with Western literature tropes need to see, is that those are good stories to read. So
You can also, sorry, I'm gonna go back to anime. You were talking about community, and the best example I can think of was Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, because in the absolute final arc, so for those who aren't familiar, we have the big bad father, and then the seven deadly sins, his homunculi, and he has this giant plot to turn their entire country into a transmutation circle, which will effectively kill everyone. And so we don't have just the heroes, Ed and Al, after him. We also have minor characters like their childhood friend Winry, who is a mechanic, and then the entire Amestris military. And it's notable that Ed and Al are not the only ones who are taking down the homunculi one by one. The whole military is at it too. And then, so maybe Ed is the one who lands the final blow, but he wouldn't have been able to do that if Al had not sacrificed his entire body so that Ed could get his arm back because the big bad crushed the metal arm.
and he would have been completely screwed without his engineer. Without her. And that's the thing, is that she can't do everything by herself, but without her, things fall apart.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, one of the things that
Literally.
I really appreciate and I strive to do when I'm writing is to have people exist in networks of other people. I think Aliette de Bodard does that really well in her Suya stories, showing people in their relationships with other people and showing how those webs influence the decisions people make and what they're able to accomplish and all of that nice stuff. Because agency is not, I don't know, like if you're in the middle of that, agency does not mean that you have to pick up the entire net and drag it with you somewhere, right? It can mean you just know how to pull on the right strings in the right ways so that everybody gets together and achieves an optimal result, I guess.
This is just my preference, but I also don't like how, in order for the chosen one to be able to save everyone, other people must die so that he
Yeah.
can step on their shoulders. I'm not a big fan of that. Like, and maybe it depends on how well done a story is, because definitely in Harry Potter, I did not see the point of so many people dying just so that Harry could achieve his objectives.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there is that trope, right? That the person who instructed you has to die or be eliminated from the scenario somehow so that you can prove that you really can do this by yourself. It's like, really? Must we? No.
That's where you get a lot of remove the parents from the scene so that the child can grow into their own.
Oh my
sort of-
goodness, so many dead parents, especially moms.
Oh,
It is, yeah.
we can be heroes. I think that's.
Yes, parents can be heroes. Parents should be heroes.
But no. There's a movie. Yeah, it's We Can Be Heroes, and it is the pull it together. The kids are, the parents fall, they're the superheroes and they fall. And it's a story about how they're gone and there's an alien invasion coming and their kids have to pull it together and save the world. And you're all concerned about the parents. And this is a major spoiler. It's a training scenario. And, the parents are just sitting back there in their little locked cage with the TV going, wow, look, our kids are really awesome.
Oh man.
They're coming to get us. And the kids are like, but you're evil. It's like, no, we're just, this is a whole training scenario. You folks are fine. You're good. And it's
Where are the human subjects' permissions?
It's a fun movie, and I'm doing a really crap job describing it. You should go find it and watch it, because I think we didn't actually fridge the parents for your development.
We only tried to traumatize you as though you had lost your parents.
Yeah, okay, there are better training scenarios, I'm sure, but it was a fun movie, and it was heartwarming or something uplifting. We enjoyed it.
Is it really not trauma if it was pretend trauma?
Okay, ask the kids who have gone
I was also betrayed trauma
through active shooter drills, because that,
well, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, but this is different. It did not strike me as being along those lines, possibly because the active shooter drills do not let the kids have any control over anything. And in this movie, they are putting in, they are making choices about what to do and how to do it and how to do it together, whether to do it together. They are making choices and taking actions.
I honestly think that all that has to happen is some form of change. I mean, you can have the resolution of a story just having somebody make a decision. Right? I mean, it doesn't seem like anything that's necessarily very huge, but some decisions are super personal and also super huge for people and really meaningful and don't involve fireworks or anyone dying or, gosh, yeah. I mean, I just think there's so much to agency that gets lost when we reduce it to the ability to handle external physical conflict.
Yeah. Well, Buffy, old thing. She has all her skills. She's, physically strong and all that. But Slayer is supposed to be the chosen one and alone and friendless and all that. And, Buffy tried real hard to push people away and function that way. And finally, and her friend said no. And she finally said, screw it. I'm choosing to say, go away. I'm not, maybe I'm the chosen one, but I'm not alone. I have these friends and we're going to do this thing together. And yeah, it's rougher than that. But those, that's a choice that she made in a situation that she did not have a lot of power over, really, because have she tried not being the Slayer? Yes, she tried not being the Slayer. Did it work? Really didn't. So she didn't have a choice about that, but she has a choice about how she does it.
I also think that I don't know. I have a fascination with systems, cultural systems and institutional systems. We talked for a while about the invisibility of institutions some weeks ago, and I think that highly individualistic stories tend to erase the significance of those structures. the cultural structures and the societal pressures and the institutions and family and all kinds of stuff sort of gets pushed down. But that's a choice. It's a narrative choice. And so there are all kinds of other narrative choices that you could make too. I mean, writing people in the middle of systems is actually really complicated and challenging, but I mean, worth doing.
Yeah. And having the systems there, if you look at a character who's isolated and you look at the decisions that they're making about how to handle things, who to talk to, what solutions to try, if you do that in isolation, away from the systems that made them who they are, families they grew up in, cultures and communities and pressures, then you can look at their decisions and say that was a poor choice. But in context, it was the only choice they could have made, or it was the best of the two choices they had. And if you pull the context out,
well, I mean, one of the
you
things
have to guess, and that's not fair.
Family stories is those are often about choosing what kind of a support network to be a part of, and how to take agency in the networks that you have and find a way to exist outside of, for example, an abusive environment or that kind of
yeah. But
that's a really interesting form of agency.
Yeah, to change the environment you're in, to choose to leave, you choose to leave home and go, live somewhere, and somewhere else, and how sensible a choice that looks, how that choice looks to other people depends on in part on how much those other people know about the circumstances that you left, the context you're coming out of. And it depends on their context, their own context, and it affects how they view the decisions that you make, whether or not they know your context.
Something shocking I discovered from my thread was that some people actually found the Black Panther movie, well, they didn't like it because they thought T'Challa didn't have enough agency, and that he was that he was a reactive protagonist. And then the person who tweeted this is like, but that's the whole point, he's reacting to his inheritance. And like, so that made me think, I think I relate more to protagonists who are simply reacting to a situation, because what do you do when this whole thing is dropped on you? Not everyone has the ability and the resources to just punch through this problem.
Right? And punching through might make the problem a lot worse.
Yeah.
How do you, if you're not reacting to the situation you're in, what
are you?
How else do you act? I mean, you're in a situation, and you have to either exist in that situation or get out of it. And getting out of it is a reaction. Deciding that you need to
change the situation,
change the situation, or escape from the situation. It's either way, your actions are based on what's around you.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe I'm missing what they mean by reactive character, but I don't.
The opposite of, well, in the context of Black Panther, I think the opposite of a reactive protagonist would be a protagonist that is actually causing problems, which is Tony Stark. So,
yeah,
and it's just my personal preference, but I do not like Tony Stark at all.
Like, I'm gonna dig a hole and then I'm gonna get out of it. Yay!
Well, my
kid has thoughts about Tony Stark and character development, but that's a whole nother thing that my kid can talk about for a long time, and I'm sure that they have a thread somewhere. But yeah, dig a hole and throw people in it and jump in it, and yep.
Jump in and then get out, and then get back in the hole and dig it deeper and get out again.
Yeah.
But starting in a situation that because he is in a situation. I mean, he's born in a situation. He's got money, he's got power, whatever, and then he changes his situation. Yeah, I think that's it. Because the Black Panther was born into a situation and is not reacting by digging a hole. And
Well, I think actually it's kind of interesting because any kind of inheritance story has got that aspect to it where you probably had some more control over aspects of your life before the inheritance hit. I mean, at least if you're stepping into a position of power that has very specific kinds of responsibilities, that's not an unfamiliar type of situation. And I'm not
writer.
kind of agency people are looking for in that context that wouldn't be what was already there. But
Well, that's a whole different kind of story. I mean, there's Aragorn, who chooses to walk away from it, and then
I'm gonna go spend
really
out there. I'm gonna spend 80 years out there.
Because I can, because I don't want to. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
choosing to he made a choice, but he could have made the other choice. He could have said, yes, I could walk away from this. I am choosing not to.
So it seems to me that there's a distinction to be made between power and agency. One good definition of power I've read is power is the ability to manifest intentions, which is entirely different from agency, which is the ability to direct things, I guess. There's overlap, but they're not the same. It's kind of a Venn diagram. So one thing when you're world building to think about is how much power the power of your protagonist is not necessarily related to the agency of your protagonist. And some of the most powerful people don't have a lot of agency, which is why they make poor protagonists, right? Like the king or queen of the country might be the worst choice for a protagonist, because although they're very powerful, they can't go out on quests, right? Captain Kirk notwithstanding.
They can't go anywhere. It just depends on what kind of story you're telling, but
yeah. If you've got this is bad. Queens as protagonists. The Mangoverse by Shira Glassman is the series, and the first book in that is the second Mango, and her protagonist is the Queen, and that works really well.
It depends on the kind of story, like you said.
Have you read? You haven't read it, Cliff, have you?
No.
I recommend it for not right now, but your kids might want to read it later. I will.
Can you put it in the chat?
I am.
Cool.
Well, there's the Goblin Emperor, right? Where suddenly this person out on the fringes is thrust into the nest of vipers that is the court.
Yep. And that's
Right.
also something that happens in the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. The outsider who gets thrust into the pit of vipers and deities, that is the court. So
In a
Right.
reverse,
And he has a lot of agency as I mean, a lot of power as emperor, but not a lot of agency. He has to figure out he has to find his way to
Yes, to
his agency.
learn how he can use the levers that he can use. Yeah, and it's a growth.
He has to figure out what they are before.
Yeah,
he can
they're hiding in plain sight that he doesn't even know he has.
well, that's intersecting with the whole outsider teaching us about how things work.
Yes, the classic world building tropes use the outsider to teach about a world.
Were you going to say something, Vita?
oh yeah, in a reverse of what we're talking about, there's this anime called Yona of the Dawn, and she's a princess of her kingdom, which is actually declining. And then one day, her cousin, who she was actually in love with, kills her father and drives her out of the palace. That is episode 1. And but the whole arc of this story is about how she has way more agency as this wandering woman with her band of men who solve the problems of her kingdom than she ever had as a princess.
Mm.
Well, look at the job of vice president of the United States, right? What's your job? To break a tie vote in the Senate. That's pretty much it. That's all the power you have, right? But agency is an entirely different thing.
Yeah, I think part of it is recognizing, understanding yourself and understanding your situation, and and knowing what you have control over and knowing what you don't have control over, and
or learning that
with those things that you do have power over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I've been happy to see a lot of the sort of marriage related stories giving a little bit more agency to the women in the stories, who are not just sort of being plonked into situations, but are having to try to understand why it's important for them to get married, and in what way, and what these different choices will mean for the social structures around them. I always find that kind of interesting. So even when you only are given one, only given one thing, which is to say yes or no to a marriage proposal, you can still get a lot of mileage out of that if you handle it right.
Yeah. I'm rewatching The Musketeers, BBC Musketeers from, I'm not sure, a while back. And there are a number of women, 3 women in particular in the story, who have real voices and real choices and real restrictions. And it's complicated and interesting, and the ones that you think are the strongest don't really have a lot of control over their own lives, just the way they react to the circumstances that they're in. And it's too complicated for me to just try to figure it out on the fly here, but it is interesting, and I recommend going and finding that.
Gosh, I mean, I'm tempted to say that strength and agency appear to be very different things to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the ability not to be pulled off your moral compass is a form of strength that is not like typical.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maintaining your principles on some level, or deciding how to change them. I don't know. I think a lot of this is that we've gotten so what I mean is that Western narratives have gotten so into this sort of spectacle of explosions and fighting and all this kind of stuff that sometimes the some of the most compelling human aspects of narrative are lost.
There's a video game that I've been playing, and there's, a number of battles and, save the situation things. And there's a final battle in the main line that involves the entire city, and decisions that you make along the way can affect how many guards there are to handle the invasion of the evil forces. And my co-op partner and I have been through this half a dozen times, and the best solution that we have found is, before going into the event that triggers the attack, just lay traps all over the city. Just lay traps all over the city. And we did that. We go in, we trigger the thingy. They say we're going to be attacked. Well, we go out and defend the city. And we go out and boom, boom, boom. All the bad guys are down before we even get out there. And the town guard is alive. There are many fewer burnt bodies. And they're all the bad guys. And all we did was lay a bunch of traps. There was not a lot of excitement, not a lot of explosions, not for us. I'm sure the town guards are just like, don't step. Oh, you stepped on that. I guess I don't have to actually draw my sword. That's cool. Works for me. And that, that is, and if you don't do that, you win, the battle is won anyway, because there are all these town guards. So you can make the situation better for the town guards or worse for the town guards. It doesn't matter if you get knocked down. There's a team working there. And you can make things better for people, but you're not actually the only required person. And I think that's one of my favorite battles in that game, is that you can just, it's great if you contribute, but it really holds up the everybody contributes to this event, into this coming out well for the most number of people that you want it to come out well for. And that's a story I like.
I just thought of this other story. It's a classic that I think in the end, even though there was so much violence in it, ultimately rejects conflict. It's called Candide by Voltaire. And it's a picaresque. So Candide and his friends get into a lot of trouble in different countries, and sometimes they cause the trouble themselves. But in the end, he settles down in this farm garden, and then they're not happy. They're also not miserable. And his conclusion is, after seeing all of these terrible world affairs, maybe the best thing to do is to tend to one's own garden, which some people construe as mind your own business. But he also wants to tend the garden to produce something of value and sell it in markets, which means try to make the world a little better in your own way.
Yeah. There's a certain, it's the sort of the scope of one's ability to make the world better might be small. Yeah.
And the ways in which people make the world better, you can make the world better by making it prettier. If you grow flowers, they don't have to be, nutritious vegetables, but they'll make people smile.
Yeah.
And
I don't think we put enough value on small acts like that, narratively.
Yeah.
Well, so we are 1 minute to 5. Other thoughts, Paul or Cliff?
Besides that, Voltaire used the best of all possible world building.
Well played, Cliff. Well played.
Nah.
No, I'm good. I think this was a really good conversation. And there's
Mhm.
lots more here, and I'm very glad that
There's a lot more here.
Oh, yeah.
Rita came to join
It
us.
would be really valuable to do a discussion of story structure itself at some point in that.
Yeah, the different act structures and stuff. Yeah, I'd like to know more.
Yeah. So let's think about doing that. I've got some things scheduled for the upcoming weeks, but maybe Vita, you and I can talk about having you come back and we can talk a little bit about story structures and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Right.
Like
Well,
that.
thank you so much. Vita got up early so she could be here with us today. Thank you so much. So
Thank you for inviting me.
absolutely. Well, next week, Marie Brennan is going to be back talking about I believe it's the Night Carnival of 100 Wings.
Yeah. Her Legend of the Five Wings
Night
novel.
Parade.
Yes.
Night Parade.
Night Parade of 1,000
Night
Demons.
Parade of okay. Cool. I was like, I know it's not Carnival. Darn it. My brain went whoop. Yep. And then we're gonna see Stina Light and talk about Persephone Station.
Oh, excellent.
So
I
that's gonna
love
be
that book.
really fun.
Yay!
And those are going to be the next 2 weeks. Stina is going to be here on the 19th with that, which I believe is a Friday. So it's not going to be our typical day of the week, but I will be posting updates in order to make sure everyone remembers. So
Cool.
anyway, thank you all for being here today. I'm going to stop the broadcast.